I love Minecraft, but I have a bit of a problem. The mechanics of a 3D game can be a lot to handle for a new player between movement, camera coordination, positioning, coordinates, and resource management. I know some may struggle with these kinds of things, and I'm aiming to make a device that'll help with that. The idea is this. It's a physical desktop device and an LED array with the screen that is synced with a Minecraft instance that can help to display certain pieces of information. It might include things like the player's coordinates, the player's current position and how to get to their spawn point, light levels, or even close hostile mobs. Depending on the situation, the player should be able to switch between modes to display certain types of information for the kind of task at hand. The information will be split into two distinct modes, where the first mode will have the first kinds of information, and the second one will have the other types, so the lighting and the entities, where the first one is more of a travel mode. The travel mode should simply display the player's coordinates, as well as the direction to the player's spawn point in the form of a compass, so kind of like the in-game compass. It should also display how far away the player is, to give them a count of blocks or a time estimation for how long it will take to get home. The next mode, including light levels and entities, should give the player the light level of the block at their feet, so whatever they're standing on, what that light level is. This should be useful for building and caving, where it would serve as a guide for when to place down torches, but also where to put them to prevent mob spawns. The entity radar should also include useful functions to tell the player of nearby mobs above and below ground, just in case any get stuck in caves below your building. The mechanics and inner workings will be addressed later, but we need to talk about the design of the device first, and the ways that we're going to make it useful instead of just kind of a gimmick. There are many ways and approaches of how to design a good device or product, but I'm going to focus on one, and that's Don's Norman's principles of design, and they're made up of 6 distinct criteria, though they change between variations and the people that you talk to. These criteria cover different parts of the design process, which are perfect for what we want to do, making a Minecraft device that not only displays information, but displays it in a way that is useful to the player or to the person using it. To cover these items and help explain them better, we're going to be following a standard Minecraft worker to show you how you might encounter these principles on a day-to-day. Discoverability. Someone using this device can figure out what the current state is. Think about an open or a closed door, on or off. For us, this means that the information is being displayed at any given moment, meaning signals for which mode we are in. Since we will have 2 distinct modes, we need to make sure that each state has an obvious indicator, as well as a signal that the state has changed. For example, a physical button switch, like the flick of a light bulb, counts, but since we have lights and screens implemented to the design, we can also use lights, brightness, and animations to help make these things easy to discover. Constraints. Constraints are exactly what the word describes, and they are design decisions that guide actions and make functions more obvious by limiting certain interactions. Let's tackle the 3 main ones, and you might get a better idea. They include physical constraints such as a pair of scissors not being able to be bent backwards, unless you try hard, a USB-A connection not being able to be used in a specific direction, or a microwave not powering on when the door is open. Semantic constraints include something like an open sign on a storefront. We can link a powered neon sign as a welcome sign to come in, while a powered off one discourages interaction because the store is closed. These are constraints that may not physically limit us, but come from our human understanding of systems in life. Lastly, cultural constraints are even more specific than semantic ones, and they can be something like a staff-only sign. There's nothing stopping you, physically or semantically, from entering, assuming the door is unlocked, but you wouldn't normally enter an area marked as restricted. A mix of semantic and cultural factors were taught to us growing up to respect authority in signage, which can be used in your design. For our applications with this device, we'll just be using physical constraints with how to put the lid on, as we wouldn't want the user to reverse the direction of the lid to match the wires and components, which could break something. If we had more modes and functions, semantic constraints could be useful, like visual warnings through color and text, but I deem these unnecessary for this project as we will only be having 2 modes. Feedback. With well-implemented feedback, a user is able to easily tell that something has happened or something has changed. For us, we will have meters that go up or down and distinct modes changing from our travel-based mode to the light and entity mode. we want to make sure that the player 100% knows what mode they're in at any given point in time. To make this feedback more obvious, we will also use a series of LED strips, mentioned previously, to add visually reinforcing feedback. For example, the current light level of 15 can correspond to an LED strip that is full of light, while a light level of 0 can be an empty LED strip. The perceived difference in brightness as well as the physical fullness of the LED bars, that is, which LED rows are in a brighter state, can help to reinforce this specific metric. Conceptual model. A conceptual model points out that the design of the product suggests how the product functions, which helps a user build a mental model of the device. To clarify some terms used, a mental model is what a certain person thinks a device is, how to interact with it, how it functions, etc. Everybody knows what a pair of scissors looks like, and everybody has an idea of how to use a pair of scissors, but each user will approach the use of an item differently due to personal, physical, or cultural reasons. We want to mirror that understanding of progress bars with physical orientation as we have it in the real world. Every loading bar, progress bar, and temperature gauge in real life is displayed in this way, where left is empty and right is full, or the bottom is empty and the top is full. This will be similar for the compass, where north and south are typically the top and bottom of a screen, and east and west are right and left, respectively. At an even higher level, we want to accentuate the screen and the ways that people can interact with this device to show that it's an electronic device and not something else. Mappings. This principle states that actions, movements, and the display of data should be cultural, space, and time appropriate. Think about a stovetop or microwave, where turning a control knob to the right or clockwise usually always correlates with an increase in cooking time or temperature. In Minecraft, each meter depletes approaching the left. Compasses are oriented the way that we expect in real life, and even the colors used in the UI should be what the user expects from societal norms, where green often represents good and red represents bad, or where blue represents a cool temperature and red represents a hot one. These are things we expect in the West, but may not be the same in other global cultures, so be mindful when you're designing for these things. Affordances and signifiers. Affordances are items that suggest allowable or intended interactions with the system. Think about a shopping cart where the handles and places to be held are brightly colored plastics, versus the plain metal grates of the rest of the cart. Doors also exhibit this, where the door handle is almost always a different color than the door itself. For our device, we want to make sure that buttons to interact with are obviously colored or labeled. Looking also counts as an interaction with the system, so we should make it obvious on where to look. These include clues that show where interaction takes place or what things change using form, color, and shapes. Visual affordances and signifiers also apply to digital systems, like with unique glyphs and symbols to accent certain parts of the UI to make each mode distinct. The mode switch button is the only thing on the lid that sticks out, which is a type of physical affordance we will use to our advantage. These heuristics together create a genuinely cohesive and useful device. A lot of the communication and design heuristics used are noticed on a subconscious level, where the things that people expect from items that they interact with, but don't necessarily notice. In the case where one of these things is reversed or incorrect, like a knob doing the opposite of what you want, they're frustrating in the moment, but that's really when you notice them. We'll tackle how these heuristics are applied with physical design details in a section later, but just think about how these items could be applied to our new device, as we just saw examples from Minecraft. Another important concept for this device is Information Access Cost, or IAC. This principle speaks about the mental and physical effort needed to access information at any given moment. For example, let's take a look at a computer keyboard. If the user doesn't have the layout memorized, they're going to need to search for every single item on the layout, in this case QWERTY. For some uncommon keys like the backslash or page up, page down, home, end buttons, those kinds of things, the user must physically move their hand out of the way to press the key, as these are usually out of the way of the keyboard, away from where the user would rest their hands. The visual effort is the user looking throughout the screen and to the keyboard to hunt for words and keys to type. The physical effort is them moving their hands and fingers to actually type on the keyboard, and the mental effort is looking at the screen, memorizing the words they need to type, then retyping it on the keyboard. Good design aims to mitigate the amount of effort needed to complete any of those tasks. So for the QWERTY keyboard layout, it might not actually be the best case because the commonly used letters are spaced out. But things like a standardized keyboard layout, which is QWERTY, and home row bumpers are good examples of information access cost heuristics. For our case, we have a simple graphical UI that will only display a handful of information on it at any given time, and will be designed with this heuristic in mind. For example, if the user has to move their eyes around the entire screen to get a piece of information, this poses a heavy visual and mental effort as they dart around the screen, remembering each of the individual values. Placing them together, color coding them to in-game elements, and making them large all reduce the effort needed to gather this information. For elements that are similar, like for the entity radar and the spawn position compass, we will keep the compass in the exact same spot between modes to further reduce the amount of mental effort needed to find the function of these items. If they're both shaped like compasses and they do compass things, the user will pick up on that pretty fast. There is another case where this applies, and it's with our buttons and mode switching. The user is going to need to move their hands from their keyboard or mouse from playing the game to the button to switch modes, and they're going to need to know when to do that, which is a mental load. The singular mode button has a great visual load due to there only being one button on the top of the device. This cleans up the interface and makes it easy to pinpoint actions. However, if the user needs to switch between multiple modes, then they need to use extra mental effort to cycle between the different modes, realizing which one is in front of them and which one is behind. In our case, we only have two distinct modes, which is even similar to an on and off switch, so we will be using the singular mode switch button. These heuristics don't matter if there is no design to follow, so we're going to hop into SolidWorks and start making a prototype. I've already sketched some crude concept art beforehand, and we're just going to use it as a rough model for how the device is going to look. The form factor is going to be a medium-sized desktop device, and it will be larger in size due to the lack of a custom PCB and the fact that I want to reuse most of these components later. If you're interested in designing and dimensioning heuristics and rules, comment that down below and I can talk about it in a different video. For now, I want to focus on the Norman's design principles mentioned before and the human factors design behind the project. When designing the enclosure for the device, we have to pay attention to how the user will interact with the device as well as how the device actually goes together. For this project, durability, use cycles, and movement aren't necessarily focuses. I will be using friction fit for most of the mounting and joining with this device, as the user won't need to open, close, or generally move the device around that much. Other solutions like metal fasteners, magnets, or dovetails also work, but this is the simplest way to join pieces together in my opinion, and it's the easiest to design. Now we've got a prototype in progress and we're going to go ahead and print our first prototype. I'll be printing in 3 colors of filament, a brown, a green, and a clear for the diffusion elements of our bezel and LED diffusion. The brown and green are simply just to look like a Minecraft grass block. Print settings are fairly standard except for the clear window, which I can best describe as low and slow printing settings, with slow printing speeds, a high print flow ratio, and ironing on the top surface. Once again, not focusing on 3D printing, but you can find other videos for descriptions of these, or we can cover it in a different day. The rest of the PLA is printed with 3 wall loops to give it structural rigidity and a good feel in the hand, as well as 10% infill with the mounting pins changed to high infill percents for adhesion and strength. When tackling the design of the device, I wanted it to be a simple, cubic structure like that of Minecraft. I didn't think that rounded edges and a squishy soft texture was something I wanted to go for, though some categories of gaming products do end up looking like that. Let's start with the front of the device, which is the star of the show. We have a screen, 2 LED strips on either side of the screen, and a clear window-like insert. We have a cutout for the screen as a type of a signifier, as well as to generally increase the clarity of the screen. It covers the LEDs as when they're bare, even at low brightness, they get quite bright, so this window actually serves a dual purpose of diffusion and signification for the screen. For the enclosure, a grass motif on the top of the box adds a little bit of depth and texture to an otherwise flat 3D printed model. The rest is relatively straightforward as it includes an angled screen, an interface to make viewing easier, a mode switch button, and a cutout on top for intuitive and obvious user interaction, that is for the button. The top of the device houses the back mount / lock type system and the mode switch button. It's mostly just a lid for the box. The inside of the device is mostly designed for ease of installation, as well as being able to reuse all the components inside. If we are able to solder, we can miniaturize the device further and decrease the physical footprint, but I would like to be able to reuse these items in the future, so this won't be possible with this constraint in mind. Now for the iterations. Draft 1 was purely about getting a physical product and playing around with the items, filament, and the physical design. Many of the things did not fit, including the screen, RGB strips, and switch, so that means nothing fit together except for the two halves of the box. It was very cramped and required a lot of effort to solder wires and place electronic components in their places. It also raised concerns of tolerance and space between components, which will need to be addressed in Draft 2 when the items properly fit. Draft 2 included a lot of changes, including switching screens due to the display chip being poorly supported, and the form factor not quite working for my purposes. After this draft, all of the components fit inside of the enclosure, but we'll need to revisit this when we begin to solder and finalize. The final draft, Draft 3, included the final touches, features like clearance for the soldering points and wires, the reset button, and proper resistance for items like the ESP32, breakout board, and friction mounting points, so nothing broke. In total, there were about 8 versions across each of the main drafts, changing internal components, tweaking tolerances, real-world fits, and other minor design changes. And there we have it. From starting with the concepts, the application of various design heuristics, CAD concepts, and modeling, the Minecraft companion device is done. This one's powered off, but you know. Let's show some B-roll of the device in a Minecraft survival session accompanied by the device. Now we're going to go through and explore each of the functions of the Minecraft companion device. So by default, it'll look like this, where you have the weather, the time, the current coordinates of the player, as well as the spawn and navigation compass and the indicators, the LED and the button. So right now I'm close to home base within 50 blocks of it, but if I back up in Minecraft just a little bit, you'll see that it updated. And that yellow sliver is where my base is. So if I spin around, it'll move. So now the base is behind me and the base is in front of me. The yellow LEDs will update according to the position of the spawn relative to the player. If I switch over to the radar and light mode, you can see it tracks all entities 32 blocks above or below the player for caving and for if mobs spawn under your base. Right now, the light level is 0 because it does not take into account the skylight. It's day in Minecraft, so it should technically be 14 or 15 with direct access to light. But if I place down a torch like this, you can see that it updates to 13. I'm standing over the torch now, and if I walk away, it'll slowly diminish. In addition, you can also turn off the LEDs because they do get quite bright. And that's the same for both modes. Going through with this project provided unique challenges amongst the things edited in this video, as well as others not spoken about, including communicating to the ESP32 using a Minecraft mod through Fabric, getting individual components working with things like the display drivers, Arduino libraries, LED drivers, the sprite sheet for all the figures shown on the UI and the screen, as well as the technical learning accompanied by all of these things and integration hell. I feel like the final product is actually something that would be used if it wasn't simply for the fact that the way I play Minecraft includes mods that address many of the concerns I designed into this device. Take a minimap mod like Xeros's minimap, which cover the spawn compass, the entity radar, the time, the weather, the coordinates, And then there's other mods like Light Overlay, which shows light levels and exactly where mobs can and cannot spawn. At the end of the day, I believe that a digital experience most often has a digital solution that fits it the best. But this doesn't diminish the use of the device. In a completely Minecraft instance with no modifications, it provides a unique function of displaying present but otherwise hidden information. At any point in the game, the player has access to this information through things like the debug menu, in-game sounds, or manually tracking information, but the device puts it all together in a nice package, does the calculation, and displays the information for them. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something about the process of developing, designing, and creating some kind of project. I'm aiming to do one of these every single school term, and I hope the filmmaking and documentation improves as well over the course of these projects. Like and subscribe if this is something you would want to see in the future, and I'll see you next time.